Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of horns247.com, joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague at horns247.com, the one and only Eric Henry. I see him sneakily repping those Devil Rays on his sweatshirt. He is a proud Floridian, a proud Tampan. What do we call
A tampon. You got it.
Tampa. Yeah, we got to be careful how we say
Yeah,
that.
you got to be careful. Yes.
Tampa. Yes. So, Eric, we've got this full disclosure. We're recording on Tuesday, April 16th. Hope everyone got their taxes in on time because it is spring football game week for Texas Longhorns fans. And we will be doing our fair share of previewing the orange-white game coming up this Saturday. A lot of movement going on in the transfer portal, both football and basketball. Texas softball is number one in the nation again. Texas baseball now has Jared Thomas, their first baseman, on the pitcher's mound. Look, if he's the next Brooks Kieschnick, we'll take it. But we've got
a Shohei Ohtani at this point. But I digress.
Yeah. I guess, man, a couple months ago, that Shohei Ohtani comparison would have been ideal. Now it's
okay, fair enough. Good point. Good call, Chip. Good call.
But yeah. All right. So, Eric, first of all, how you doing? Did you get your taxes in, all that stuff?
Listen, Chip, it's funny. And first off,
don't have to answer that if you don't want.
No, listen, it's funny. First off, I'm doing well. Just full disclosure, we're recording this on Tuesday, April 16th, right? So just ran to you a couple hours ago at Steve Sarkisian's availability, but I'm doing all right. And here's the thing. I am an early tax guy. I like to get him out of the way because I don't want to get that knock on the door from the Internal Revenue Service and be up against the clock. So and luckily, Texas is a state very similar to Florida in that there are no state income taxes. So it's pretty easy just to, knock those out.
That's a nice thing. That is very nice. Okay, good. Good to hear. Well, let's start with where we were just a few hours ago, talking to Steve Sarkisian. That's probably the best way to preview the Texas football spring game is by kind of giving everyone the latest update as it pertains to the Longhorns coming out of scrimmage number 2. And we should mention, so that maybe as people are listening, they can also, depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening to it in the first half of this week, get over to horns247.com and make sure you take advantage of the Portal Palooza specials that we have going on. If you're an early bird, you're going to get the 60% off your first year. And remember, annual membership is the way to go because then you're going to get VIP access to all the team sites, which means you're going to be, during football season, you're going to be able to read up on Georgia and Kentucky and Mississippi State, A&M, Arkansas. You want to know what's going on. You want to be an annual member to horns247.com so that you're getting all of our reporting, of course. And it's been crazy. Portal Palooza. And all the great recruiting intel that you're getting from, Hank South, Jordan Scruggs, Mike Roach, Hudson Standish. You're getting an army of people getting top Texas Longhorns team and recruiting intel for you, including, of course, Eric and myself, Jeff Howe. So make sure you take advantage. Don't be left behind. It's going to cost you what it would, a couple of cups of coffee. You go to your favorite coffee house twice a week. Okay, it's less than that. So, it's the Longhorns, for crying out loud. All right, Eric. So Steve Sarkisian kind of started things off today, recapping scrimmage number 2, which occurred on Saturday. Of course, if you are already a Horns 24/7 member, you got your scrimmage update right then and there on Saturday, and found out that Jare Bledsoe had what could be a breakthrough type scrimmage. Eric, I want to start there because we've been talking about the interior defensive line that Texas, if the right guys show up in the portal, that they could go get some more help on the interior defensive line, and how big of a spring this is for guys like Jare Bledsoe and Sadir Mitchell and Aaron Bryant, the guys who are in the next wave. Even Tia Savea, the Arizona interior lineman transfer. And sure enough, Jare Bledsoe, who was lined up with the number 2 defense, was making life tough on the number 1 offense in this scrimmage last Saturday, against the run and getting a pass rush. We know how athletic he is. He's 294 pounds. He can do a standing backflip. He's one of these really elastic, bendy guys. And, Eric, the light bulb goes on for guys at different times. This could be something, it could be a blip, but man, if the light started to go on, Steve Sarkisian said Jare Bledsoe is cutting it loose. And if he can cut it loose from here on out, that would be a huge development.
Chip, before I jump into that, you gave a great rundown of all the reasons why you should be subscribing. Just take a look down right there, 60% off your first year. Want to give a shout out to the guys who were handling the Portal Palooza on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Again, just another reason where you're going to get that type of coverage year round, but especially just like in the pros, you get your NFL free agency, free agent frenzy, Portal Palooza, 24/7 Sports. Just another reason to subscribe. So you see it down
and
there.
We own the portal. Like, we have the best portal coverage of any team site network. We are the preeminent college team site network, 24/7 Sports.
Team site network. And Chip, I'd make the case, but the big networks you see on your TV. I don't think anyone's covering the portal like the way we are, but I digress. That is enough shilling for us, but it's the truth. Not shilling. It's not hard to shill when it is.
It ain't bragging if it's true.
There you go, CB. Okay, here's the thing, and you were the one who asked the question on Jare Bledsoe. So I agree with everything you said there in terms of sometimes the light bulb just clicks, right? I mean, Chip, I think in my experience, and I'm sure, in your experience is pretty similar, right? You got a couple of avenues as things kind of go for college athletes, Some guys, they're like what I'm going to call the JT Sanders track, right? Year one, they just need to get their feet wet in college football. And Steve Sarkisian has talked about these, made reference numerous times to year one. Guys asked, what's going on with JT? And then he just needed a year to get his feet wet. And then year two, he has a breakout year. Year three, he plays well, and then he's gone, right? Or sometimes it's the Alfred Collins route, right? I'll call it that route where, you just see those little glimpses here and there and here and there for a few years. In this case, Jare certainly not as long as, maybe you've seen with AC, but you see the little glimpses. And then, as you said, the light bulb clicks. And we've talked about it ad nauseum on this podcast, on this show. 5 to 6 defensive tackles are going to play. There's no two ways about it. That's a number going to play. Who those guys are going to be, that's up to the guys on the roster, right? It's going to be AC. You're going to get Vernon Broughton, Tia Savea. Those three are locks, right? Where they fall in the starting lineup, that I guess remains to be seen in the fall, but those three are going to be locks. All right, so you got 2 to 3 more spots to fill out. Who are those guys going to be? If this is Jare Bledsoe making his push, making his move, I think that is huge. I've talked about it again, whether it's, we heard Aaron Bryant's name last week, right? Maybe he's one of those guys. Sadir Mitchell and Zach Swanson's on the roster as well. And we'll see what happens with those guys. We'll see where they go in the portal. Chip, I asked Steve Sarkisian this question, and I didn't want to relate it specifically to the defensive tackle spot because I do think it could be applicable to a variety of spots on this team. However, I asked him to close the presser, how difficult is it to kind of go in the portal? And we'll get there, right? Maybe this is something we'll revisit next episode, but how difficult is it to have these conversations with certain guys and say, hey, we have a role for you on this team, right? Because every Chip, I've told you on this podcast before, one of my best lines I've ever heard in my time covering college football, former Texas special teams coordinator Casey Horney, dealt with him when he was at Florida International. He told me no one comes to college to be the L6 or L7 on special teams. Everyone thinks they're going to be the guy who's going to play 70 plays and be the starter and be the star, right? But in actuality, that's just not the case, right? So I asked Steve Sarkisian, how difficult is it to have these conversations and say, hey, we have a role for you. Maybe it's not 60 plays, maybe it's not 70 plays, maybe, as he said, it's not 25 carries, but you have a role on this team, and where you kind of progress from there is up to you. We'll see what happens, but if Jere Bledsoe makes his push, then I think, Chip, and again, we'll see what happens post spring football, post April 20th, and then, of course, up until April 30th with the close of this portal window. But that, in my mind, would be huge, because I am a huge advocate, a strong advocate, I think is probably a better way to put it. I just would like to see the guys on this roster make a push. You're here for a reason. And Chip, maybe I'll just kind of give it back to you on this, because I'm sure you'll want to talk about some of the other aspects, of Saturday's scrimmage. This is what, the second week in a row, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we've heard Steve Sarkisian say the red area has been an issue, right? That, the offense maybe have gotten the better of the defense in the red area. And we don't know specifically what that's been, whether, because those have been closed scrimmages, Chip, whether it's been, going up the middle of the defensive line, or kind of where some of those things have been. But it's a spot in specificity referring to interior defensive line that you would like to see squared away or solidified in a way, Chip, because, as again we've talked about, you're not going to be as good as you were last year with Sweat and Murphy. It's unreasonable. However, one of the areas that you really can't afford to see too big of a drop-off, Chip, even if it's not harassing quarterbacks, it's not Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy running Will Howard out against Kansas State and forcing that errant pass, right? Even if it's not that, you can't afford, in my mind, Chip, a drop-off in the red zone. I think that's the area where maybe you're not a top 5 group in the red zone, but you got to be top 15-ish, top 20-ish, I think, if you're going to accomplish the goals that, Steve Sarkisian wants to with this team.
Yeah. Red zone defense, third down defense, excellent last year for Texas. The run defense, number 3 in the nation, and that's probably where you're going to see the step back. Only giving up 82.4 yards per game on the ground, making one team after another one-dimensional. It's all hands on deck. And so, yeah, I mean, you don't want to see a step back anywhere, because anyone who was watching Georgia's spring game, they don't look like they're taking a step back, and they're coming to Austin in October. And who knows, that could be a preview or an elimination game for the SEC title game. So, yeah, it's and this defense lost 2-time first team All Big 12 middle linebacker Jalen Ford, and Anthony Hill is learning. He played some middle linebacker last year, but not a lot. I mean, now he's making all the calls. He's mission control for that defense, and he wants it. He's gonna swim to catch up if he's in the deep end right now. But it's still a learning process, and they're all learning how the guys in front of them are playing. And they didn't have to wonder if Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy were going to control their gap. They knew where the run was going to squirt, and they were there, and they were ready. It's not like that right now. Guys aren't necessarily controlling their gap as consistently. The offensive line is a veteran group. They're winning some battles in that red area, and you're seeing, Jaden Blue reap the benefit of it. He had another big scrimmage in the red area. And shout out to Colin Page, who may have had the play of the scrimmage. Bounced off one tackler, spun and broke another tackle to get into the end zone. So kudos to walk on Colin Page from Anderson High School right here in Austin for his play in that red zone work in the scrimmage last Saturday. But yeah, some of the other performances that stood out, Steve Sarkisian saying that Malik Muhammad not only intercepted a pass, which we reported that was against Arch Manning, but he also forced a fumble because the refs apparently ruled a catch, and then Malik Muhammad was able to strip the ball out. So he's had an unbelievable spring, one of the best. Colin Simmons got to mention. Andrew Makuba got to mention for his physical play at safety. And Steve Sarkisian said, "Look, we're not tackling to the ground very much, but we did in the early part of that scrimmage on Saturday." And Andrew Makuba was physical, and he said we needed to see that because we know Makuba from his time at Clemson is a really good coverage guy, and that's a breath of fresh air. And then if he's giving you the physical play against the run or coming downhill, whatever, then you've got a complete safety. We talked about this before, Eric. Last year they rotated 5 safeties, and it seemed like they were all good at something, but they weren't good at everything. Jaron Thompson, good in coverage, not a great tackler, not a real physical player. Derek Williams looking like a complete guy, but was young last year. Jalen Catalon, really good against the run and a good box safety, but not great in coverage, blah, blah, blah. Michael Taff, kind of always in the right place, had those 3 big interceptions in games back to back against Houston, against BYU and K-State. And, from what I'm told, it was the first team safeties in that scrimmage were Derek Williams and Michael Taff. Makuba was running with the second team along with Jelani McDonald at safety. So who knows how that'll play out? They're all going to play, but yeah, those were a couple of the names. And then DeAndre Moore. DeAndre Moore had a touchdown catch in the scrimmage. He's had a really good spring, probably the most consistent of the receivers, honestly, because I was told Isaiah Bond, who's been really sure-handed, had a couple drops in the scrimmage Saturday. So did Jonte Cook, who also had a touchdown Saturday. So, it's fascinating. Steve Sarkisian talked about it today, Eric. Quinn Ewers, he's got 10 receivers he's trying to build chemistry with. And he feels like Ewers is really dialing in and performing well.
Chip, it's interesting you mentioned that, right? Because I did hear Steve Sarkisian kind of talk about, the aspect of chemistry. And that is, and again, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. That's the one spot that I'm a little bit bullish on, in the sense of the idea that Steve Sarkisian addressed it. He said, hey, if a guy doesn't have a great spring practice, that's what spring practice is for. 15 of these, and we'll have our exit meetings. And I wrote about it. Go check out the notebook, available on Horns 24/7. You'll see the full quote. But he said, hey, we'll have our exit meetings, and we'll give them, a 360 view of where they need to improve athletically, weight room, on the field, academically, the whole 9. And I don't believe Steve to be, fronting, for lack of a better phrase, in that answer. But when you have so many receivers, I just think by virtue of the transfer portal, some of that is going to be whittled down for them. But more importantly, what you just hit on, the aspect of developing a rhythm and timing. I don't think you can develop timing and trust and chemistry with 8-9 guys, right? Like, I don't think you can. I think you can do that. Listen, I never played the position. I'm not claiming to, but just using human nature, you can do that. You can throw with all the guys you want and get as many reps with all the guys you want in the summer and And I have no doubt that Quinn's making the effort to throw to, Parker Livingstone and all the guys as much as he throw into Isaiah Bond. But when you're out there and you're running ones-on-ones, right, and you're in the heat of the moment, you eventually going to start developing relationships with guys you trust more than others. So that to me is the one where I do think inevitably it gets very interesting. And I've made mention on this podcast, you're going to throw Silas Bolden in this mix as well, right? So eventually that I think is going to get whittled down. Part of that is going to be the coaching staff and who they trust. And Steve Sarkisian, knows better than I, had been around here his entire Texas tenure, has been huge on who he trusts, right? That being a factor at the receiver room. But I think inevitably, Chip, that's something that you got to keep your eye on, because yes, you want to develop all the receivers and have the same quote unquote type of rapport that you have with, all the guys are the same. But I just don't think that's just not realistic in my mind, Chip.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get a good glimpse. I'm sure we'll be counting reps and snaps and who's out there the most at receiver on Saturday for the orange-white game. Because let's be honest, when Quinn Ewers announced he was coming back to Texas after losing all of his top pass catchers, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, Jatavian Sanders, even Jonathan Brooks, his 1,000-yard rusher, who's such an effective receiver. You knew portal help was coming, and it's here. Now we're gonna get a chance to see it. Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, the transfer from Houston, and of course the up and comers, Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore, and the early enrollees, Ryan Wingo, Aaron Butler. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And we know Sark likes to get the ball down the field. He's got more speed at that position. It's ridiculous. All the sub 11 100-yard or the 100, track guys he's got at receiver. So, interesting that Steve Sarkisian mentioned Arch Manning maybe having his best practice as a Longhorn today. And he based it on Arch Manning stepping up in the pocket, stepping up in a dirty pocket with calamity going on and delivering the ball, eyes downfield, delivering the ball on time and on target. And Eric, that's a big step for college quarterbacks, because if they have athletic ability, some of them, I'm thinking, of course, of Sam Ehlinger, Johnny Manziel, they want to run out the back of the pocket and just try to outrun people. And that is not sustainable. It is, Johnny Manziel got away with it. He got killed in the NFL when he tried to do that stuff. But being able to step up in the pocket, especially a guy of his stature, Arch Manning, 6'4", 220. I saw him in the parking garage today. He is put on good weight. And so that's a big step. And Quinn Ewers talked about how Arch Manning looks so much more confident in year 2 in this offense. So that's an important step forward to keep an eye on for Arch Manning.
Chip, can I just jump in really quick on that point you made there, or that Steve Sarkisian made? Listen, I am not comparing the player I played with in high school to Arch Manning, but I did play with the future NFL quarterback in high school, a guy by the name of Alex Magoo, who ended up going on to play at Florida International. And he told me that the biggest challenge for him coming from high school, and he said really for any quarterback who, any measure of athleticism with size, the biggest challenge from high school to college is learning how to step up in the pocket instead of working this way, right? Because initially, when you're in high school, you get any type of pressure, you're more athletic than everyone, you just go this way. And then either if you want to run or you want to throw it, you're creating time for yourself out of the pocket, and then you look for your receivers. So I just wanted to make that point, because it goes to show it doesn't matter if you're, a 3-star recruit who ended up to, getting drafted in the 7th round in the NFL, and had a couple of years and changed the NFL, or you're the number 1 rated recruit in the nation, Arch Manning. It's still a development. So when we talk about Arch and all of the skills and all of the talents he does have, he is still learning some of the nuances. And despite the fact that he comes from a famous football family, even something like that, Chip, I just think when I heard that, I remembered when Magoo told me that, and this was interesting because that's like another facet of the light bulb going on in the development of a young player.
Yeah. Yeah. And Quinn Ewers made that adjustment last year, stepping up in the pocket. Steve Sarkisian, I think he feels good about his running backs. CJ Baxter, Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner, Quintravion Wisner, as he's listed in the roster. And, I think because he was asked about carries and running back, and he said, not concerned, feel good about the three guys. And in talking about Trey Wisner, he said that Wisner can be the move guy that Keelan Robinson was, and a between the tackles guy. So that's nice because you're not sacrificing. And look, Trey Wisner is one of the better stories of spring football. He came in ready, and a guy like Savion Red who came in overweight. Trey Wisner has moved ahead of Savion Red, so he's made the most of the spring. Sarkisian said Jarek Gibson had his best practice today, and that Christian Clark had his best practice in Saturday's scrimmage. So the young guys who, every time I mention their names, I just mention that Tashard Choice compares Jarek Gibson to Roshan Johnson, and he compares Christian Clark to Bijan Robinson, and he compares Jaden Blue to Jahmyr Gibbs, who he recruited and coached at Georgia Tech. And Tashard Choice knows what he's talking about. And then Juan Davis, Eric. Juan Davis continues to get mentions. Senior tight end who was seen as a down the field tight end, almost more of a receiver when he first got to Texas. And now he's filled out. He's blocking. He's trying to be physical, and he's catching the ball down the field. And I think Steve Sarkisian is really paying attention here. And it's good to have depth. Amari Niblack's still learning the offense. Amari Niblack's going to be a playmaker for this offense. Don't kid yourself. But having a guy like Juan Davis, look, if he's good enough and Sarkisian's going to be rolling guys this year, this would be big time. I mean, last year when JT Sanders got hurt and there were times where you were wondering, should he even be out there? He gave up the sack that ended up with Quinn Ewers, suffering the injury against Houston. Juan Davis, just keep an eye on the senior, because he is fighting for playing time.
No doubt about it, Chip. And the thing that stuck out, that stands out to me about some of the conversation around some of the guys you talked about, the depth in the running back room. And listen, I will continue to mention this until I'm blue in the face. Young guys. I wish I looked like Christian Clark and Jarek Gibson at 18, 19. I mean, folks, again, if this Saturday is going to be your first glimpse of these guys, you're in for a treat, because I'm just telling you right now, they are young. They look like grown men. So I just can't continue to emphasize that enough. But to your point about Juan Davis, I think that one is interesting as well, right? Because again, you talked about it. You don't know if a guy gets banged up. You don't want to be left with, virtually nothing behind you. That's one thing you can't say about this tight end room, right? Whether it's Gunnar Helm or Juan Davis, or even some of the guys that say are emerging, like, Spencer Shannon as well. So definitely, in my mind, Chip, the thing that comes to mind is the depth. That's going to be key. And listen, we've talked about it a ton, right? And I think it's something that we can probably dive deeper into over the summer. What position group or groups, but I feel confident enough about this roster, Chip, that I'm going to limit it to one group. Which position group is going to be the one that, again, doesn't quite play to the level of last year's group. The natural inclination would be defensive tackle, but we can flip that question and say, what group's going to be the one that rises to the occasion, right? Which one's going to be better than last year's group? And I know, Chip, you're pretty high on the secondary and kind of their growth, right? So we really, when I come back to depth, I don't want to say that, being 3 deep at tight end can offset maybe what you might get a defensive tackle if you're having red zone issues. But I just think you're going to need guys to rise to the occasion, given the fact, and Steve Sarkisian talked when he was asked about the possibility of how many guys, 11 guys who went to the NFL Combine and had invites and things of that nature. So you're going to need an overall, a rising of players to kind of get to the occasion. And I think that one is interesting. You talk about Juan Davis, a guy, and to bring it back where we started, the light bulb, right? With Juan Davis, maybe it was him being banged up a little bit. I know he had some soft tissue injuries early on in his career, but that's another one you can say as well. And one other thing I want to acknowledge, Chip, I don't know if we should acknowledge the elephant in the room. I'm going to knock on wood here. Saturday's forecast. Do we acknowledge that at all? Because I don't know what weather app you folks are using at home or Mr. Brown uses in his household, but
not looking good.
It's not looking good, CB.
It is not looking good. Yeah, I'm really hoping that some front pushes whatever this mess is through. But yeah, right now it's 70% chance of rain, thunderstorms, showers. Yeah. Let's hope that they had horrible forecasts for the first day of the Masters too, and those didn't come to fruition. But yeah, come prepared, folks. Come prepared bring your ponchos. Steve Sarkisian also talking today about the wasn't real clear on the format of the spring game.
Right.
But he's just happy they'll have 2 teams. When I asked him if, with all the new faces, if the season started today, who his top 3 receivers would be, he said they're all playing well. And I thought that was interesting. He might be trying to keep them all, on the hook at this point. But look, they've got an embarrassment of riches there at the receiver position.
Chip, in terms of a spring game, I know you talked about it, right? Wasn't really clear with the format. Just going to throw this out there. I got a strong feeling we're not going to get the Ole Miss format. I'm assuming you saw that, my friend.
Yeah.
I think it's a safe bet. We're not going to get that. So I'll just throw that out there as a for anyone who may be curious, saying, do I get out there? No, wondering what you're going to get. I don't think you'll be seeing a dunk contest, tug of war, or I guess they had some 7-on-7 at some point. So at least that might have been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, Jahdae Barron. I asked about Jahdae Barron.
Yeah.
And Sark said, you know what? We know what we've got in Jahdae Barron, and he's had some lingering, nagging injuries, and we want him healthy. So I noted in my scrimmage report on Saturday that he was not a participant. And it's been a light spring for Jahdae because they are trying to let him heal up and be ready to go.
Chip, all jokes aside, I just want to make a point on Jahdae. Did it seem to you, and this was kind of my thought process as I was writing the notebook, we all know he was pressed into emergency duty against Houston, right? Had the ankle, wasn't supposed to play. All of a sudden, it's break glass in case of emergency. He makes the game-winning PBU. Hindsight being 2020, did it seem to you that Jahdae just wasn't? And listen, no one is. They give us the company line, right? No one's 100%. It's football. It's physical. The end of the year, no one's 100%. But he seemed to be battling a few nagging injuries. Fair?
Yeah. He did not finish the season the way he wanted to, and I think the injuries probably played a role in that. So good for Steve Sarkisian. Now that's also opened the door for Jalen Gilbo,
Right.
who's had a fantastic spring. One of the stars of the spring had another pass breakup um, in Saturday's scrimmage against Isaiah Bond, and is playing with a lot of confidence. As Steve Sarkisian said, he's back. He's back to what he was 2 years ago before a knee injury that kind of took him out of the picture for a while. So, um, and then asked if there's going to be anyone who won't be active for the spring game. He said, "I don't know yet." Um, and Obviously, you've got some players that you're going to want to watch. Cam Williams at right tackle, number 56. Um, is he ready? 6'5", 360. The junior, is he ready? Is he ready to take over for Christian Jones? Or will they, be moving Hayden Connor over to right tackle and promoting Neto Umazulu? Some of the young guys, you're going to see the ones, hopefully the ones against the ones, maybe not, but at least for some portion, you hope. But then you're going to see the younger guys. And I think, a couple players to keep an eye on, Eric. Obviously, we've mentioned some of the early enrollee freshmen who are making plays. Ryan Wingo, um, Jordan Washington at tight end, number 84. They're really high on him. And, um, Xavier Filsamy, number 21. And um, Kobe Black, number 6. And Wardell Mack, who is he's in the 20s, I think. 27.
There you go.
Those guys are all players I've heard good things about. And Alex January, number 97 at defensive tackle. And Colin Simmons, number 11, obviously.
That last or second to last one, Alex January, was one that will cross my mind just because of the conversation we had at defensive tackle. I'll give you one who's not necessarily a young guy, but a new guy that I am very interested to see just kind of how he looks. Trey Moore. We've talked about him a little bit on this podcast. I'm just curious to see, how he'll look. Obviously he's played in a couple big environments. UTSA has gone a couple decent road trips. Obviously they've played at DKR, Texas Memorial Stadium. But what's it like when you got the burnt orange and white on, right? Like, so that is a name as far as transfers that's one that I am keeping my eye on for short chip.
Yeah. Number 31 in your program, number 1 in your heart, Trey Moore. And they like him. They like Kelvin Banks said Trey Moore and Colin Simmons are making the tackles better because they have really good get off. These are faster pass rushers who can convert speed to power. And that's what Texas has been looking for. So Colin Simmons has made plays in every scrimmage. He had a sack in the first scrimmage, and he was getting pressure in the second scrimmage. So this is a guy who he's got it, and they're gonna have to be creative because I love what Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell give you in terms of setting the edge against the run. And Steve Sarkisian's talked about the fact that they got burned really in the passing game last year on first and second down. And I wrote about that in the Insider last week, that it was a bunch of chunk plays on first and second down, especially in the games where opponents came back. TCU, K-State, Houston, the Oklahoma game, the fourth quarter drive to win the game by Oklahoma was one chunk play after another, including a 15-yard pass interference penalty against Terrence Brooks. And then, of course, Washington had a 77-yard play on the second play of the game. So this is going to be really interesting to watch in the secondary because You've got Jalen Gilbo, who's getting raves. You've got Jelani McDonald, who's kind of pushed his way into the two deep, and Warren Roberson, who's pushed his way into the two deep at corner. And I think Malik Muhammad is a lock for the boundary corner job. But Gavin Holmes has been making a lot of plays, and I think is really pushing, to be a co-starter with Terrence Brooks at the field corner. And you got Warren Roberson backing up Malik Muhammad at the boundary corner. And you've got young guys like Kobe Black, who had a couple of pass breakups in the scrimmage on Saturday, and Wardell Mack, who is making plays. And, Jordan Johnson Rubel, another freshman at safety. This guy's a headhunter. Like, this guy's fun to watch. So remember this number 23, Jordan Johnson Rubel, because his kind of play will flash in the orange-white game if they're tackling to the ground, which I expect for some portion of it they will. So lots to keep your eyes on as you head off to the spring game, and of course we'll recap it all. Eric, anything else that is top of mind as it relates to the spring game other than bring your poncho?
I think you covered most of it. I mean, the final thing I'll note, and of course we've talked about on the podcast, Michael Kern will arrive, but I'm just curious to take a look at some of the special teams work. I just want to get a feel for what it looks like. Bert Auburn's in tow. You got Lance St. Louis, right? So you got that. That's Will Stone's back, kickoff specialist. So just want to take, let's not totally write off, what the rest of special teams will look like. So that I'll be keeping my eye on. But
yeah, I mean, you lose your returners. You lost
right.
Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington. They handled punt return. You had Keelan Robinson on kick returns. He's gone. Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner have been getting looks on kick return. And as far as punt return, man, take your pick.
There are a lot of guys getting looks.
I mean, Isaiah Bond, Jonte Cook, Matthew Golden. The list goes on. So that'll be fun. Yeah, I agree with you. I want to see what that's looking like. All right. We've got some other news. The basketball team has basically been rebuilt in a day. In a single day this week, Texas got transfer commitments from Julian Larry, the point guard from Indiana State, his teammate, the 6'7" wing, Jason Kent from Indiana State, and Arkansas shooting guard Tremont Mark, who spent his first 3 years at Houston playing for Kelvin Sampson, 6'6". Eric, I mean, they've transformed their perimeter. Bringing back Kendall Weaver, who's 6'3", but plays bigger than that because of his length. Julian Larry, 6'3", Jason Kent, 6'7", Tremont Mark, 6'6". And these guys have played a ton of basketball. The three transfers I just mentioned are all 4-year guys who are going to use their COVID redshirt season to play a 5th year of college basketball like Max Asmus did last year. So big day for Rodney Terry and Texas basketball.
Yeah, Chip. Listen, I'm going to get right into the heart of the matter for me. We'll have plenty of time to talk about these guys. And I want to run up a little bit against the clock here as we're at 44 minutes. But Chip, I want to give you my biggest takeaway from the additions, specifically of Mark and Kent. This is a statistic that I cited in my article talking about these guys, kind of what they bring immediately. So per CBB Analytics, which again, I'd recommend if you can't spring the money for it, which it puts it this way, Chip, a subscription to horns247.com, 60% off of your first year on the industry leader in Texas Scoop, a lot cheaper than CBB Analytics. So I'll just say that. But Chip, here's the biggest takeaway for me, right? When you take a look at Mark and Kent, high efficiency shooters. Kent shot 63.9% from the field last year. It was 9th in the nation in field goal percentage, and Mark was a player who shot very well as well. But Chip, how many times did you see Max Asmus and the now transfer portal bound Tyrese Hunter drive to the hole, drive inside the defense, but it was hit or miss whether those guys would finish. So let me just give you the numbers. Mark shot 48% from the field last year. That is better than both of the starting guards and Asmus and Hunter. Asmus shot 42.5% from the field. Tyrese Hunter shot 45.2%. But you take a look at the ability around the rim, Chip. Mark shot in the paint, made 60 of 75% of his shots within 4.5 feet of the rim, and went 38 for 68, which is about 53% shooting in the paint. You compare that to Max Asmus, who was 71%, and Tyrese Hunter was at 60% at the rim, and then 40% and 37% from the paint. When you take a look at their numbers, Chip, they're below the college basketball average by at least 6 percentage points in terms of finishing at the paint, in the paint.
Asmus and Hunter.
Asmus and Hunter are, yes. Why do I mention those two statistics specifically? Mark, while he doesn't take a ton of threes, only took 99 last year, still shot at a higher clip than Max Asmus. So believe it or not, would have been would have been the second leading as far as percentage points, 3-point shooter last year. But the reason I mentioned that, Chip, in that Tennessee game, if Texas could have just bought 1 or 2 buckets, you're probably talking about a Sweet 16 team. You're not talking about having to depend on listed in your stat in your media guide at 6'1" Max Asmus. I say listed because I've stood next to Max Asmus. It's iffy. And listed at 6 foot Tyrese Hunter. You're talking about taller players who are higher efficiency shooters, especially when they dribble, drive, penetrate. You could have loved to have had a bucket or 2 down the stretch to cap that comeback. So again, take a look at that article on Horns 24/7 if you want to read the numbers for yourself. I think those are 2 huge things they bring offensively and, of course, defensively. Longer players who will be able to defend on the perimeter more efficiently.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Make sure you check out that article because Eric Henry does have a subscription to CBB Analytics, and you only have to get a membership to Horns 24/7.
There you go.
To enjoy Eric's giving you of CBB Analytics. All right, good stuff there. We've talked about the Texas women, Deanna Gaston going into the transfer portal. This is a tough one because so much experience, so many games played for Texas. 6'2", athletic, can guard players bigger than her. But I think she wanted to be the featured player. I think there was some NIL opportunity for Deanna Gaston, so good for her. And Vic Schaefer's got a lot of talent returning, and he's got 2 of the nation's best players coming in his recruiting class. And so Texas women's basketball, who made the run to the Elite Eight, is in good shape. That one hurt. There's no doubt about it. Texas softball, number 1 in the country. They swept Baylor. This team looks like it's starting to put it together, and some of the fielding miscues that were happening earlier in the year are getting cleaned up. We talked about the incredible play at the plate to finish off OU in game 2 of that 2-1 series win over the Sooners. Then the Sooners lost again after playing Texas. So Texas goes to number 1, and Mike White, he wants a new stadium. If he keeps winning like this, he might just get it. Texas baseball, God bless America. I don't know what's going on with LeBaron Johnson, but make sure you read The Insider, which you can only get with a VIP membership that comes out on Thursday morning. There's another reason to race right now and grab that 60% off annual membership to Horns 24/7, because our man Jeff Howe is going to break it all down for you. But yeah, Jared Thomas, the hard-hitting leadoff hitter First baseman is on the mound Tuesday night against Texas Rio Grande Valley. So, look, they're trying to figure it out as they go. Has not been the year that LeBaron Johnson wanted. All right, Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
Let's get in some take it or leave it, CB.
Let's go. Let's go. Yeah. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll along here. It is time for some take it or leave it. Eric, am I dishing first this week?
You're the point guard. You're dishing first this week.
Okay. The player who most needs to show you something on Saturday in the orange-white game is right tackle Cameron Williams. Take it or leave it.
I'm not mad at that one, Chip. I'm going to take it because in my mind, and I said this to you as we were just, kind of doing our recap as we typically do after Steve Sarkisian's presser, how I feel about the quote unquote starting 22. And I do think of the players who are kind of battling for positions and jockeying, I think the one that you have the most quote unquote question about is right tackle. So of players who wants to show me something. The other one I kind of debated was Tia Savea, Vernon Broughton. But either way, I still feel that, we've talked about the DT spot ad nauseum. It's not going to be a one-man show this year. It's not going to be a two-man show this year. That's going to be a multiplayer show. But you're not going to rotate 4 or 5 players at right tackle. So I'm taking this, Chip. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to take it as well. I mean, Cameron Williams, big guy, got his weight down to 360. He used to be 374. And I've heard, that he's struggled with the faster pass rushers, the Trey Moores, the Colin Simmons. But I had another source say, we're thinking everyone's going to struggle with Trey Moore and Colin Simmons. So we'll see. But I'm watching that. Let's specifically when he's taking on the faster pass rushers. So, yeah, I'll take that as well.
All right, take it or leave it. Number 2, Chip Brown, the position group that you're most excited to see on Saturday. Key being most excited is that loaded receiver room. What you got?
See, like the Barnum and Bailey circus aspect of me is wanting to take this because there's such new faces. But I kind of get the feeling whatever I see on Saturday, that group is going to be fine. I'm more excited to see what the secondary is looking like in this orange-white game because that group needs to have chemistry and, have it together. And from what we've heard through the first 2 scrimmages of spring, the secondary has not been giving up explosive plays. They have made the offense drive down the field. I want to see that. I want to see Malik Muhammad. I want to see Gavin Holmes, Terrence Brooks, Warren Roberson, Jelani McDonald. So I'm going to leave this, Eric, because I'm personally more excited to see the secondary. How about you?
I am going to leave it as well. And like you, I'm interested into kind of see what this secondary looks like, specifically the safeties. We've talked about that a ton, this podcast, that rotation. What did this year's group look like, right? I'm getting our first glimpse, Andrew Makuba, and some of the young guys. I'm just genuinely curious to see kind of, I'll give you another guy. How does Michael Taff? Michael Taff is someone who we talk about, and I think, I don't know if you agree, Chip. Sometimes walk-ons tend to get like typecast, right? As like the gritty guy who, is scrappy and whatnot. But Michael Taff has slowly worked his way into, power conference caliber starting safety, right? So does he take his game to another level? So I'm going to go with the secondary, Chip. That's me.
Yeah, and Jalen Gilbo. We want to see what Jalen Gilbo's got. Number 3, because he's had an off the charts spring, according to Sark, according to sources. So, all right, take it or leave it. Number 3, Eric, transfer commits, um, point guard Julian Larry, shooting guard Traymon Mack, and wing Jason Kent mean that Texas will contend for an SEC title in the 24-25 season, Texas's debut in the SEC. Take it or leave it.
Forgive the typo there. I think we might have ran out of room as far as characters, but obviously, from transfer commits from Indiana State, Julian Larry, Arkansas, Tremont Mack, and Indiana State, Jason Kent. But I am going to leave it for now because I want to see what the front court looks like. Caden Shedrick is coming back. I don't want to poo-poo on any other outlets, but you may have seen some outlets report that Caden Shedrick is coming back. I'm sure you've seen an outlet that you listen to on the regular report that in the locker room after the NCAA tournament. So we've known that, right? But Dylan Mitchell in the transfer portal. So what does that look like? A guy that we've talked about a lot, Chip, just you and I, maybe not a ton on this podcast, but just, between ourselves. Zarek Onyema. Is Big Z ready to become a force as a rebounder and rim protector? I've seen Zarek Onyema from his time in Conference USA at UTEP. Everyone knows he's raw, but there's still some potential there. We'll see what that looks like. You're bringing in a guy like Nick Cody as a freshman, but I just want to see what the front court looks like. I'd like to see just a little size there. I still think Brandon Garrison's a guy to keep an eye on. Rytis Petratus is another guy to keep an eye on as well. See if Texas is able to land any of those guys. So I think they've gotten better, Chip, and I cited those numbers that I gave earlier in the show. But I just want to see what the front court looks like. So I'm not quite ready to take it. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to leave this because I don't think Texas is done in the portal. We'll maybe come back to this question once we know where all of Texas's scholarships are going for the 24-25 season. But reeling in commitments from Julian Larry at point guard, and could you possibly be in the mix for Jordan Pope, the point guard at Oregon State, have depth at that position? Look, that's exciting. Jordan Pope is a rising junior who would have 2 years at Texas, and Brandon Garrison, who Eric mentioned is a rising sophomore, would have 3 years to play eligibility at Texas. So good stuff. Lots going on, kids. We'll leave you with this. Get over to horns247.com and get that 60% off promo. You can't afford not to take it. Because it's probably the last time you'll see that promo in 2024. All right. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Flagship Podcast. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. We'll be back with our recap of the orange-white game next week and the latest on all things going on involving the transfer portal. Until then, stay safe and keep the faith.